Croft, how are you, sir?
I am fine and dandy, as one can be
Mm.
in unprecedented times.
Well, I think when do they become precedented? I mean, it's been what 9.5 months that this thing's been sticking around. Is it the
Yeah,
year mark?
yeah. I mean, it's a fair point. Yeah, it's kind of unprecedented, in the sense that it's unprecedented for us. Like we've actually been doing quite well in this
That's
state
fair.
against the unspecified virus of unknown origin. It, it's actually we actually had a few cases over the years. They've kind of gone away.
Yeah,
Um,
that's fair.
so interestingly, my sister this week was supposed to fly to Queensland.
Mm.
Overseas people, Queensland is a state of Australia. For Americans, Australia is a country in the southern hemisphere, just to the sort of the left of the left of New Zealand. So you'll find it on the map. And she had to cancel her holiday because the state is closed, or Brisbane is closed. It's a little bit like you have that line in you ever seen National Lampoon's Vacation where they roll up at the Wally World and he says if they don't close the state of Florida, and I'm like, yeah, sure about that. But so Queensland is closed to us Victorians, so she had to rejig her holiday plans, and I have a trip planned next month to South Australia and the Northern Territory.
Yeah.
And it sort of made me realize that, under normal circumstances, you travel domestically, it's pretty low stress, right? I mean,
Normally, yeah.
But now it's like you could land up somewhere, and if shit goes sideways while you're there, you may not be able to get home. And it's like the Soviet Union. It's like Papa's players,
It's not even sort of like you. There's not even the guarantee that you're going to be able to actually get your flight. It's like you have to get flight insurance just in case COVID comes along and get a case of COVID or something.
No travel insurance policies cover COVID.
It's so nuts.
I was looking at one going, I should get my travel insurance so I can cover my trip. You can't get a travel insurance policy in this country that will cover you for COVID-related cancellations or problems.
Wow.
So you're basically, it's a waste of money, essentially, like if it's COVID. Yeah. You're worried about it. I mean, it's, if you're hiring a car, maybe. But my flight home from Darwin to Melbourne transits via Sydney. Quite a challenge to find out what you have to do, whether I'm allowed back into the state.
Yeah.
Transiting through Sydney. But what I learned is, yes, I am. But technically, to enter our state, the state that your beloved producers broadcast from on a weekly basis, you need a permit. No matter which part of the country you're coming from, even if it's not one of the parts of the country that's got COVID problems right now, you can't come back into the state right now without a permit.
It's just so weird.
I think that counts as unprecedented, really, considering this is a federated country and, hard borders haven't existed in this country since the 19th century. So it's been a while, in other words. So it's kind of weird. Like you sort of go, this trip's kind of risky. It's a little bit risky in the sense that if I end up in Darwin and all of a sudden there's an outbreak of cases in the Northern Territory, yeah, getting back to Victoria could be an interesting challenge. A number of people from this state have been stuck in other states when they closed the borders. So I'm sure, I agree with closing the borders, by the way. I've always given up like the United States. Sorry, American friends. You're not exactly the world-leading example on this one.
Yeah. We won't go into particular details about what's happening in the US at the moment because
I'm just talking about the pandemic in general.
Yeah. They've got nothing else going on right now. It's fine.
There's not much else going on over there. The pandemic, you could be doing better. But I think we've got a pretty tops show for you this week.
Yeah, I think, ladies and gentlemen, we've been on quite an interesting run recently. Last week we talked about the Michelle Rodriguez feature film debut, Girlfight, which was released in 2000. And whilst it does feel very kind of dated in its kind of aesthetic and style, we still both really loved it and really enjoyed particularly the performance of Michelle every time she was on screen. But we decided to follow on her trainer, Jamie Tirelli, was in the much lauded cult and fully fledged classic, shall we say, the Brian De Palma directed Carlito's Way. So that is our movie for Chain Movies this week. We didn't get a chance last week because we both were talking about Disney's Pixar's Soul and Wonder Woman 84, but I will be talking about my experiences with Twin Peaks. Travis is going to touch on Totally Under Control, as well as Mandalorian Season 2, which he has recently just finished. So, should we get
straight into it?
Yeah.
Carlito's Way. This is George's first time seeing this film. So that's a bit exciting. This
just
is
another
film...
quick point, actually.
Yes.
Following on from last week, we did have one of our chat, someone in the chat asking if you can donate, which, crazy, if you really want to, you can. You just go over to our Twitch channel, go into the About section, and there's a little donate button where you can donate via PayPal. You're welcome to put whatever you want in there. You don't have to, but anyone who wants to, sure, go for it.
I'm not going to say no. Very strange. So Carlito's Way was released in 1993, as you noted. It's directed by I wouldn't say the great Brian De Palma, but the memorable Brian De Palma. He's done some interesting stuff over the years. Star quite a cast. We have Al Pacino as Carlito, Sean Penn as his lawyer Kleinfeld, Penelope Ann Miller, who was kind of memorable in the 90s as Gail. Yeah. She actually saw her name pop up in the credits. I'm like, I remember her. She was doing stuff, but then just John Leguizamo as Benny Blanco, Luis Guzman in there as well, a very young Viggo Mortensen in a small role. Quite the cast. Written by David Cope. I'm not sure exactly how you pronounce his name. Pretty well-known guy. Wrote a couple of films you might have heard of. Jurassic Park, Spider-Man, Mission Impossible. Kind of a well-known guy. He's the screenwriter who wrote this film. This is another gangster film for Brian De Palma. Probably one of his best-known works is the film Scarface from the 80s, starring also Al Pacino as a Puerto Rican gangster.
And his other gangster movie, The Untouchables.
Very much so, but very different tone to this one. Though that one also ended in a train station. So
that's a thing for trains and train stations, because he even directed Mission Impossible 1, which has got a big finale on a train.
That said, apparently he wanted to film the finale of this at the World Trade Center. What a memorable ending that would be now, considering what happened afterwards. But there was a bombing there in 1993, so that kind of ruled that out at the time. So he went back to a train station again. Well, stick with what you know, I say.
Yes, absolutely.
So I've seen this before. What did you think of it?
I didn't know quite what Pacino I was going to get going into this, because this is one of those classic, everyone who considers themselves a Pacino fan or anything, they'll bring up Carlito's Way. I've got a very on and off admiration for Sean Penn, so usually I'll go into any movie that has him in it with a lot of trepidation. I wasn't sure if this was going to be kind of Scarface over the top Pacino, or the more reserved Godfather Part 1 Pacino, or somewhere bizarrely in the middle with Heat, something like that. And I was really surprised. I really appreciated the role of Carlito and Pacino's portrayal of it, and the way that the narrative of the story leads itself. The fact that it is, as seems to be quite a trademark of Brian De Palma, he kind of, in the opening 5 minutes, opening credits almost, of a number of his movies, he kind of tells you everything you need to know about the movie. And it's like, this is, if you pay attention, there will be no surprises in this movie. And it kind of speaks to a certain level of, I guess, confidence in his product, I suppose, that it's not about surprise or suspense per se. It's about the quality of what is on screen. And for me, this is a really good, really strong movie. I really liked the way that Pacino played Carlito, being Al Pacino has always got this kind of energy bubbling under that he's kind of parodied to the point of death now of exploding randomly. But he never really does that except maybe 2 or 3 instances in this where his character, where he seems to genuinely, heartfeltedly be trying to actually change his life for the better. And it's just every time it's sort of like, even Pacino himself as an actor says the line perfectly. Every time I think I'm out, they pull me back in, from Godfather Part 3. And that is perfectly on display here. He's been off the streets for 5 years. He's back. He wants to not have to go to prison anymore. So he's trying to just be honorable, respectful to the new people that have taken over the streets in his absence, and to sort of build a normal life. And he comes across as actually quite a sympathetic character, and you kind of, that the code that he lives by and tries to kind of lead others into, you want to believe that he can make it, or at least I did. And every time shit goes down, it's like, fuck, that is just such bad luck. You don't feel like, oh, he's making a bad choice. It's just, you have been put in a fucking horrible situation. The very first time when I think his nephew is going off to do a money drop and a pickup, and shit hits the fan. And so, like, yeah, to be fair, if I was an experienced assassin and criminal like
he
Carlito,
says that like he's not.
Huh?
He says that like he's not.
Yeah, no, there's no evidence. I make sure of it.
Anyway, so you're right. He sort of you saying so he goes along with his nephew's deal, and shit goes sideways.
Yeah, and the fact that it's like he starts just, especially at the end, he's talking about, I've got 5 hours, I'm playing every angle in my head, and you can see him doing that in this early encounter, early fuck up scenario. He starts trying to set up this trick shot on the table so that he's got a better view of the rest of the room and stuff like that. And he's a really smart character, and you can't help but feel for him over the course of it. You don't particularly like him, but you can understand and appreciate, and I felt like I could just go for the ride and get into his headspace in a way that quite often Al Pacino's performances don't let you, because they're usually so volatile and expressive. For me, it feels like you are there to watch. You are not there to participate. And I felt like he was allowing you to actually get into the feeling of Carlito. So I really, really appreciate that.
One thing I sort of, to carry on with something you said there, is he sort of ends up in some bad situations, which really aren't his sort of fault. But I kind of felt that was one of the themes of the film, was he was sort of washed along on this tide of potentially where he came from in a way. And the Penelope Ann Miller sort of, Gail, her character Gail, says it at one point in time, like, your, dedication to this ancient religion hasn't turned up for the Death Star. No, it's the wrong film. But she sort of notes it, like, your dedication to the the law of a street, the rules of a street. Like, you don't tell on anyone, you don't rat, yada yada yada. That hasn't bought you anything, hasn't got you anywhere. It's got you to here, and it's gonna continue to take you. And I'm gonna end up taking you to the emergency room at 3 a.m, blah blah blah, crying. And she calls it right, because that's pretty much exactly how it goes. But and to Carlito, I guess he's in his defense, he's sort of carried along on this tide, but he can't seem to resist.
Yeah, he doesn't really fight too hard against it.
I guess that's fair, because he has come from where he's come from. He was set on it. Someone set him. It was like someone wound him up like a wind-up toy. How old is he? 40, 50? 40, 50 years ago, and just you can't, change direction at that point in time. It's a really big ask. This is all he knows. This is all he's ever known, and he's sort of carried forward on that tide of tradition and the code of a street, and not knowing a different way of doing things. And despite doing his best, it's a bit like trying to swim, you're getting caught in a rip. You can try really hard, but if you don't know exactly what you're doing, it's going to carry you out to sea. And that's, I think, what happens to Carlito in this film. Unfortunately, as you say, he's a fairly sympathetic character here. He's not. He's trying to go straight. He's trying to live a better life. He kind of wants to get away with Gail and and be a father and so on and so forth. So you have quite a bit of empathy for his character.
Yeah.
Let's go for some of the other characters in the film. I think he and Gail are definitely the only ones who approach likability.
Yeah, absolutely. And going into Sean Penn, the character of Kleinfeld, who is straight off the bat, he looks dodgy as fuck. And you kind of look at it and go, all right, why, Carlito, why are you friends with this guy? I'm curious as to how they became friends and things like that. And it's like, why? Oh, it's like their relationship is the ultimate nice abusive relationship. You can see Kleinfeld just being constantly going down this dark path and very clearly choosing it. Like, it's no surprise when he reveals that he did steal the $1 million. And it's not really any surprise that he made audio tapes of his clients and shit. It's like, yeah. And Carlito's kind of obvious to it, but he chooses to have that blind eye of, but I owe him. He's my friend. It's like, oh, wow. Okay. And I think it's even...
This is what I'm sort of talking about. He's kind of stuck, right? I mean, he's been bartered with evidence that his friend has betrayed him. But he is stuck in that code of the street, the way he has been raised, and the way the code which he's lived his life by. He doesn't really have a lot of wiggle. It feels like, as a character, you can sort of see, he doesn't feel like he has the authority, the personal agency to step outside those lines that he's painted around his life.
In a lot of ways, I kind of feel like Carlito, the character of Carlito, is almost like a Shakespearean hero destined for failure, where no matter what he does, the outcome would always be the same, and he is that tragic character. I don't know. I haven't read the books because apparently this is based off of 2 books by Edwin Torres, Carlito's Way and After Hours. But the way that we are shown Carlito, how he is portrayed by Pacino, how he is brought along through the narrative thanks to Brian De Palma, there is that sense of inescapable destiny to the character that adds to the sympathetic side and the emotional connection that you have with the character.
This is a fairly different sort of performance from Pacino. If you talk about his iconic performances, interestingly, he won the Oscar for Scent of a Woman, and I don't know that I would consider that one of his iconic performances because I don't think I've ever seen that film, and no one talks about that film anymore. It was like one of those consolation Oscars. We should have given him one for Serpico or Dog Day Afternoon, or Godfather, but we kind of fucked that up. So you have one now. It's like, they happen, right? But if you talk about, like, as you sort of said, The Godfather, Scarface, Serpico, Dog Day Afternoon, those Heat, I would say, I think is a fairly iconic role for his. He, I don't think has actually in any of those other films played a character like this one, who has kind of sort of a quiet dignity about him and a quiet determination to get out of a situation that he's in. Whereas the others, you sort of know, he kind of plays Al Pacino. He's as you sort of said, over the top almost. When you look at it, I mean, you compare this to Scarface, which probably is maybe the most natural comparison, which is almost parody of it's almost so over the top. It's a joke, but I think it suffers from Godfather effect in the sense, again, that's a film that's had the piss taken out of it so many years now that it's kind of hard to take the original performance seriously, though at the time it was probably fine.
I think.
Sorry.
I was just going to say, I think with the character of Carlito versus kind of all the other characters that he's had, that as an audience member, I kind of feel like, all right, I have a very good understanding of what his personal morals and rules are, and I feel like I could have some form of a relationship with this guy as long as I stick to those rules. He's not if I am sticking to his rules, he's not gonna fucking kill me. Whereas most of his other characters have got this real unhinged element to them, whether he's a criminal or a cop. There's that kind of always that breaking point in his character that's sort of like I wouldn't want to be friends with his character from Heat, even though he's kind of a good guy.
But he's kind of a an asshole at the same time.
Horrible person.
It's kind of a horrible person you probably want working for you, in a way, if you weren't working for the police, because he wouldn't take the backward step when facing. You honestly could almost say De Niro's character in Heat had more in common with Carlito than Pacino's. I mean, you can kind of see that kind of works for me. I can sort of quiet stoicism that those two guys had. I like to call it. You mentioned it, Sean Penn in this film. You sort of said you had an up and down relationship with Sean Penn as an actor. I think for the most part, he's one of the most talented actors of his generation. I don't know. I'm kind of on the same page as you. I don't know how often he's actually brought that to the table. I mean, when you see a film like Mystic River, which he won his Oscar for, or Milk, which he won his other Oscar for, I think those films are. I always thought, well, in fairness, I haven't seen them in a while, but I really liked them when they came out. But I don't. If something like The Game, I thought he was really good in The Game. The feature film, or U-Turn, which is an Oliver Stone film. Dead Man Walking, of course. So, but the same for every one of those. There are a lot of self-indulgent crap around it. You sort of look at the films he's in, and you're like, I've never heard of any of these films. So I feel he's a very talented guy, and I think this is actually one of his better roles. I mean, he really inhabits that character of Kleinfeld. He's repugnant. He is repellent. As he sort of said, apparently it was Penn's idea that he had a receding hairline. He just exudes sleaze, which I think is probably what, again, not having read the book, is what the character was about here. And he sort of personifies this sleazy, mob lawyer. And I thought it was wonderful in this, and his sort of descent into sort of drug-addled gangsterism that he gets to at the end of the film. It's apparently he did the film because he wanted to act opposite Pacino, and I thought he meant
that opportunity.
Well, I mean, it would be intimidating as an actor, I would imagine. You're like, I've never been that good at anything, so it's hard to say. But I used to play field hockey when I was a teenager, and occasionally I played field hockey for a little while for my university. And the university had some very good players playing for their teams, and occasionally in scratch matches, to use the American term, practice matches, with the squads of people who are getting, in the senior teams, ahead of me down the bottom, you would end up standing next to, for 5 minutes, someone who potentially could be in a conversation, could be in a conversation to play for Australia at some point.
Yeah,
that kind of thing. And you'd be like, holy fucking shit, that's that dude, right? Who I saw on TV, playing, in Commonwealth Games or whatever. So I can only imagine if you'd have to be very confident in your own abilities to stand opposite someone who is that good at what they do, and not be intimidated and go, I can go blow for blow with this guy, or at the very least, I want to see what I can do. I want to see if this person brings out the best of me, and I think Pacino did here.
Well, I mean, thinking of the movies that Pacino was just coming off of in leading up to this, in 1990 he did Dick Tracy, then was Godfather Part 3, Frankie and Johnny, Glengarry Glen Ross, which is awesome, Scent of a Woman, Carlito's Way, and then 2 years later he was in Heat. So it was a bit of an odd time for Pacino, especially when you think back on those movies. They're not like Godfather Part 3 is not well remembered. Dick Tracy has got a cult following now, but it wasn't a success then. And then the movie going back to 1983 with Scarface, the rest of them are ones that I've not heard of. The local.
I think, though, Frankie and Johnny was a big hit at the time. Not well remembered now. Glengarry Glen Ross was a very hip film to be in. And then he won his Oscar for Scent of a Woman. So, again, as I said, I don't think that's well remembered. But at the same time, he had a big rep by that point in time. She still has a reputation now, despite some of the garbage he's been involved in the last 20 years. He was in Gilly, right? Jack and Jill. He's been in some horrible shit. And he has taken some of that sheen off his legacy as a result. But he's still a name. When you see Al Pacino in, I thought he was fantastic in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Even though he was at a 5-minute role, it was fantastic to see him doing a Tarantino film eventually. But and people said he was pretty good in The Irishman. I still haven't got around to seeing that.
That's very long.
It's the main thing. I'm like, do I really want to invest 4 hours in this thing? That does. The Irishman leads on to an interesting point. So this film does feel like a film that Scorsese might have done. It kind of feels like the dollar store version of a film that Scorsese would have done. That's maybe a little bit harsh, but
it's a bit harsh. But I see the point.
Don't think this film is well remembered either. We talked about Scent of a Woman. No one remembers that, despite the fact Pacino won his Oscar for it. I don't think people remember Carlito's Way. I mean, I think it's kind of people who were around, old farts like me, who remember when it came out, because it got a lot of kudos at the time. And Pacino's performance rightly was lauded, despite the fact he didn't get an Oscar nod for this. But I don't think it's a film that people talk about. We're talking gangster films. You're having a conversation about gangster films. What do people talk about? The Godfather, it's probably Scarface, Goodfellas, Departed. Maybe if you chuck in Casino, if they're a little bit edgy, which I think is a great film, by the way. You don't think people were talking about Carlito's Way in that conversation anymore, despite the fact it probably deserves to be. I feel like this is maybe a bit of a forgotten classic.
I'm just done a quick Google search on best gangster movies, and according to Time Out, just the other day, the 50 best gangster movies of all time. Let's see if we can skip through. We've got a lot here. They've got Casino ranked at 38, which seems very low to me. No Country for Old Men at 36. They've got some really interesting choices here. Number 18, A History of Violence, which is a fantastic movie.
Yeah, good film. I wouldn't have thought of it as a gangster film.
It kind of is, but at the same time, it's not entirely. Their number 1 is The Godfather. Number 2 is The Killing from 1956. Number 3 is Reservoir Dogs. Number 4 is Goodfellas. Number 5 is Mean Streets. 6, Bonnie and Clyde. 7, Godfather Part 2. 8, Miller's Crossing. 9, Once Upon a Time in America. And 10, Sexy Beast. It's a weird collection that they've got there.
It is. Some of those I may not have. Actually thought. I didn't think of gang. I wouldn't have thought of Reservoir Dogs really as a gangster film, but I can see how you argue it might be. But I think we're talking classic gangster movies. Like mob movies. Rather than films just happen to be having gangsters in them. I don't think Departed. I mean, the Scorsese films. He's kind of the godfather of, no pun intended, gangster films. And please tell, if there's anybody, if someone wants to disagree with me, please do. I just don't feel like it's in the conversation anymore. I don't think you hear people talk about Carlito's Way anymore. Probably the most memorable line from the film for me was when Carlito comes out of after his cousin has been killed, he's hiding in the bathroom, reloading his gun, and he comes back out and he goes, "Here comes the pain." And the main reason I remember that line is because it's in a Slipknot song.
Oh shit, it is.
So I'm like, why do I know that line? Oh, it's in a Slipknot song. And that's probably not what the filmmaker intended. So that's in no way is this an actual me having a go at the film. I think the film is fine. It has a 7.9 on IMDb, has a 65 Metascore, which I think is low. There's a couple of reviews here which people didn't like it, and sort of be saying it like, oh, it doesn't quite measure up to Scarface. I've never been a big fan of Scarface, so didn't do anything for me.
Yeah.
I can see that. I can sort of see this. It was made 10 years or so after Scarface, and you can kind of see the parallels. It's almost like a mirror version of that film and that character. So it'd be a little bit like, I don't know, Christian Bale coming out and playing another stoic superhero, and you're going, wow, didn't you already do this?
Yeah, kind of. Or I don't know, just the Scarface versus Carlito. I don't know. It's kind of the flip side of the coin of the same character. It's like, whereas Carlito has these rules, and he is desperately trying to listen to his better angels. Scarface is almost like, nah, fuck that. every possible opportunity, he's gonna go the opposite direction. It'd be almost like Christian Bale coming back into the DCEU as the Joker, or something like that.
Yeah, he's sort of playing a mirror image of a character he played before. Yeah. Maybe he's playing Captain Boomerang or something.
Actually, he would make a really good Hush.
I don't know who that is. But anyway, we're not talking about superhero films. We do that all the fucking time, and I'm sure we'll do it again later. But anyway, I think it's fair to say that it's a really good choice. Did you out of 10?
I would give this probably high 7 to a low 8.
We don't normally do the score thing, but it is the first time George has seen it, so we give you an indication. It's available on all your rental services, your Google Plays, your YouTubes, your Apples, that kind of thing.
It's not on any streaming services if you're subscribed to any, but you can still at least watch it in some legal fashion, unlike some of the movies that we follow.
Just a couple of quick things I'll polish off. I hate John Leguizamo. I think I can't stand him as an actor. Like I think the first film I saw him in was Spawn. I think I've told the story of Spawn before, and that's a film I absolutely despised. I think it's one of the few films I've walked out of. I'm very excited to see what Todd McFarlane does with his reboot, though. That'll be interesting. But as a sneer of disdain from George,
because he has been talking up his Spawn movie since before the first Spawn movie came out, and it never gets anywhere. It is one of the poster childs for development hell movies.
Development hell? Okay, well, we got Jeremy Renner attached here, and Jamie Foxx.
So he's had people attached before, and this is a global world. It's not going to get anything happening yet.
Anyway, but he really annoyed me in that film. He annoyed me in Super Mario Bros. He annoys me in most things, but I thought he was actually quite menacing in this, which is a different style for him. He doesn't usually sort of maybe play as the annoying character or the comic relief character.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, even in something like Romeo and Juliet, which he was in, and of course he played Tybalt. He probably wasn't, he was sort of antagonistic, but I wouldn't say he was menacing.
Yeah.
But he was very good in that as well. So I really respected his performance. I thought he did a lot with not much. And Louis Guzman, I thought, was a surprising turn up here, in the sense he's sort of better known in our world today as sort of his comic roles. But you're not looking at he's best known for Traffic, Boogie Nights, Count of Monte Cristo, and Punch Drunk Love. None of those are straight ahead comedies, but I think of him as a comedic actor.
Yeah.
Also, I don't know why, but I thought
he always brings a little something to every role that he does. His character in Punch Drunk Love, I really love him because he's this very run-of-the-mill guy who just so happens to work with Barry, Adam Sandler's character. But there's that every time he talks to Barry about sort of like, why are we getting all these yogurt pots and stuff, it's like, I want to help my friend. I'm concerned, but I'm not going to pull him up on it. There's that geniality to it versus his like this character where he again seems to be this very emotionally open guy who's sort of like, I want to latch onto someone and really believe in this person, and it's kind of a little heartbreaking how it ends for him at the end. And he's just an interesting character.
I guess looking at his filmography here, I've got no idea why I think he does comic stuff, because really he actually doesn't do. It must be wrong. I don't know, but he's done comic stuff, like Beverly Hills Chihuahua or something. But he was also in stuff like Oz, which wasn't funny. It was in, and he done quite a bit of stuff with PT and Paul Thomas Anderson and other things. So I don't know why I think that I have to apologize to him in advance, but I think he was really impressive in, again, a fairly small role in this film, showing some real range. Now, if you've got nothing else to say, you got two because I had two, so you're taking us somewhere different.
I haven't planned for that at all.
So I said, play me out, Johnny. I did two.
We've got a lot of
people to choose from.
Places to go.
I would just like the proper hat in there and go, could we please go to Heat? Maybe you want to watch Heat after watching this film, but you can take it somewhere more obscure if you like.
See, now, I do have a very soft spot for Heat. I do love that movie. But at the same time, I do kind of just want an excuse to go to Eastern Promises.
Now, that's a film I've not seen, so that would be interesting.
In that case, let's do that, because I watched a movie we haven't seen before. Now it's your turn. So we're going to follow Viggo Mortensen to Eastern Promises, which is directed by David Cronenberg from 2007. And it's got Naomi Watts in it, who I absolutely love.
Yeah.
It was written by Stephen Knight, who he did one of your favorite recent movies of Locke. With Tom Hardy. He's the writer behind Peaky Blinders, one of my favorite movies of the early 2000s, Dirty Pretty Things. He wrote that, which is awesome. He's done a weird Christmas Carol thing for FX, but he's got an interesting. Stephen Knight has got an interesting style, and Eastern Promises is.
It's Cronenberg. It's gonna be different. It could be streamed on Stan in Australia if you'd like to watch it with us, so to speak. Or if you don't like that, you can rent a copy from Google Play or for YouTube's. Or you can buy a copy from either of them as well if you're very keen. I'm excited. I'm excited to see this film.
Because this was Viggo Mortensen did a couple of kind of. Well, a lot of the cast of Lord of the Rings, finishing Lord of the Rings, they did a lot of kind of anti-programming for them. Like you look at Elijah Wood, and he did a lot of kind of psychotic roles and twisted roles to kind of get away from Frodo. This was no, not really. This kind of was one of two real successes for Viggo Mortensen after 2003's Lord of the Rings finished up. He had Hidalgo, which wasn't very good. But in 2005, he had A History of Violence, which is fucking awesome.
Amazing movie.
Yeah. And then in 2007, he had Eastern Promises. And 2008 is a great little Western movie, Appaloosa, with Ed Harris that I do recommend as well.
He's a very fine actor, Viggo Mortensen, who we do not see enough of these days. I really, really enjoy his work.
He's one of those guys that seems to always really put the effort in whenever he's cast in something, and I really do appreciate that.
I must say, and I'm not going to give anything away here, but I'm super tempted to take us. We've had a run of very high quality films lately. I'm very tempted to take us back to the gutter. We started this chain with gutter tier films like Streets of Fire, you know.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that we have to go back there.
You know, but what does our audience want? Do they want us to be toasting ourselves with champagne and caviar, or do we want to be eating a canned hamburger?
There's enough pain and horror in this world. Someone's got to have fun.
Yeah, cool. Well, we'll see how we go. So anyway, Eastern Promise next week.
Yeah. Now then, shall we, keeping little bit of a chain going. John Leguizamo, I can see, has apparently appeared in The Mandalorian. So do you want to talk about your thoughts of Mandalorian season 2?
Yes. I would just like to start by wasting my breath for a minute.
Okay.
And strongly encouraging my co-host to take a look at The Mandalorian, because you have, I think, Disney Plus as a streaming service you subscribe to, and you've said many times you're just not interested. But and that's why I'm saying I'm going to waste my breath again and tell you want to be on board this bandwagon. I think there's every good chance you might watch it and go, "It's crap," but I don't think if you were being honest with yourself and us, you would, because. I posted a Facebook status after finishing the last episode last night and said, how does Disney get this so right and get everything else they've fucking put their finger in with Star Wars so bloody wrong? And controversially, I include Rogue One with that. That film was not as good as everybody said it was. It was a mess.
I have an answer for you for that one.
Yeah?
The people that are making The Mandalorian are exactly the same as us.
That's it. I mean, that's essentially the answer I got from people. Was like, people said 2 words: John Favreau and Filoni.
That's why you vibed so much with Ted, because it was, Seth MacFarlane is your brother from another mother, kind of.
Seth grew up watching the same shit that I did, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
And he kind of, I mean, and I think that's why I'm wasting my breath and saying, if you grew up liking the original Star Wars trilogy, I think there's a lot here to enjoy. And it's not just fan service. So anyway, I liked season 1. If you recall, if you've been listening long enough to us, I'm sorry. But, you might find that I quite liked season 1. It did a lot of heavy lifting in the sense it did world building. It did a lot of establishing who Mando was. It did a lot of establishing what the universe he lived in was like, what was going on in that universe, where we were in our very complex and convoluted timeline now. And it was basically, we had a bounty hunter at Mandalorian, not the bounty hunter, not Boba Fett, who was tasked with basically transporting some cargo, which turned out to be, for want of a better term, Baby Yoda. To some post-imperialists, people who used to work for the Emperor. He grows a conscience and decides not to hand the baby over to them, and hence makes himself very much a wanted man by the Imperials. Everybody wants their hands on this baby, Baby Yoda, and the rest of the season is about basically keeping Baby Yoda out of the hands of the Imperials. At the end of the season, we meet our
potato.
Sorry.
It's a TV series all about the hot potato.
Pretty much. I mean, look, it's not complicated. It wasn't a complicated first season, but in the last episode of the season, we meet Moff Gideon, who was essentially our big bad for the season, played by Giancarlo Esposito. I mean, God, we've said it before. He must get sick of playing bad guys, but then again, he's got to be making huge bank now. He's the bad guy in Breaking Bad. He was still the bad guy in Better Call Saul. He was the bad guy in this. He's going to be the bad guy in a
new Fallout game.
Game was a lot
Far Cry 6.
Far Cry, right? Yeah. So he's got to be raking the dollars in now, doing his huge properties, and he just does it really well. He exudes menace in a way that I think few actors do quite as well. Anyway, so he's not a Jedi or anything. He just happens to work for the Empire, and he has a cool laser sword thing, which later find out is called the Darksaber. That's season 1. Season 2 is essentially, the plot of season 2 can be summed up in one sentence. Mando is trying to find a Jedi so he can hand the baby off to him.
Okay.
Basically, that's it. And
will you take my baby?
Sorry?
Will you take my baby?
This is set after Return of a Jedi. So,
man.
Jedi are still a little bit thin on the ground. Now, if I have I'll start with a bit of a criticism. I loved it, basically. It's just the upshot. But a critical point is, if I can be, this does call back to a lot of stuff that's not the original trilogy or the prequels. But okay. I'm told there's a lot of stuff in here from, that's so-and-so from the Clone Wars TV show or the comic book or this book or that book. And so it's calling back not a lot, but some of the fairly sizable characters and plot points here refer back to characters, particularly I think from the Clone Wars, which I think is the cartoon, which I've never watched. So if you're like me and you're basing your knowledge of Star Wars basically off the films, then it's going to lose some of its impact. I'm sure if I'd been a huge fan of the Clone Wars, you'd be like, oh, that's Bo-Katan, and I know exactly who Bo-Katan is and why she's important. Here, okay.
But it still works.
It still works. Now, stick on the critical side of things. This didn't bother me, but I can see how it might bother someone. Actually, a lot of the episodes kind of feel like plots from video games.
Okay.
But they're kind of like, oh, well, we need to go to this place to meet this person so they can show us where the other person is. But when we meet that person, they're like, oh, I'll definitely show you where that other person is, but I need you to help me with this thing first. You know what I mean?
Fetch quests.
Not really fetch quests, but more like, oh, well, this horrible woman runs a town nearby and she's oppressing the villagers. I need your help to take her out first. And then once you've done that, I'll help you, find the Jedi on the next planet, find the next MacGuffin, right? And that kind of does happen a few times during the season. Like you go to planet X, meet person Y, do the job, get the intel, go to the next thing. Now, that could be seen. I could see how that would bother some people. Didn't bother me because, and I think it's the plot. And overall, it has a very simple plot. Like I said, one sentence. But I like the characters. I care about the characters. I want the characters to survive. I want to learn a bit more about them. I want to see them talking. I want to see them having conversations with people.
Okay.
I want them to do well, which, you can get away with some, this isn't exactly Glengarry Glen Ross style writing here, right? But you can get away with that when you've created great characters and you've put the time in, and they put the time into these characters in season 1. So we know who they are. We care about them. We care about their story. So when you get to season 2 and, you're doing the same thing over a few times, and I noticed it. Sorry, guys. I noticed what you were doing. As long as you're doing it with characters I care about, and it's still fun and exciting, that's fine with me. If you're doing fetch quests, kind of, again, like you didn't say, what was the Rise of Skywalker or whatever that fucking thing was? They kind of did the same thing. Well, we've got to get the dagger from a place so we can incorporate, you can interpret the thing, and then we get that thing, and we can go hold the thing up against a Death Star. We can see where the room is, and we can go get that thing, so we can plug that thing into the spaceship, so we can fly to the other place. Oh man,
I'm right back where I started.
I actually reload an old save file. When they did it in the film trilogy, it didn't work because I didn't care about the characters and what they were doing wasn't fun and exciting. In this series, what they're doing is fun and exciting. So in episode 1, for example, Mando visits a Tatooine again and has to team up with the local marshal and a group of sand people to take on a crate dragon. If you don't know what a crate dragon is, as soon as I'm like, that sounds very familiar. Why do I know what a crate dragon is? Crate dragons were in Knights of the Old Republic. It was actually one of the actual quests in that game was to kill a crate dragon. I'm like, that's why I know that name. I think they mentioned in other parts of the films and
you with the member berries
and stuff. So and then it'll do little nods like that, little callbacks to stuff. You're like, I've played that game. I remember what that is. And so it's quite a long episode. And interestingly, the Marshal in Tatooine is wearing Boba Fett's armor. And Boba Fett, and I don't think I'm spoiling anything here. Boba Fett does make an appearance, and it's wonderful, and they do it so well. And I don't know that I necessarily would have been champing at the bit for a solo Boba Fett TV series, but I think we're getting one. So,
well, we're getting about 1,000 different Star Wars property things coming very soon, by the sounds of it. So, yep.
Well, at least they put some work in, and we actually spent some time with Boba Fett in this series. Yeah, it's like, I mean, again, the show doesn't actually stray too far from what it did in the first season. It is essentially a Western / samurai story. So, why wouldn't you? It's exactly what inspired George Lucas. It's your old style radio serials with bad guys shooting at good guys, and that kind of thing. It's very clear. It's not trying anything particularly complicated, but if you do simple things really, really well, that can be beautiful.
Yeah. Dave Filoni's filmography, and as a producer, he's produced nothing but Star Wars. As a director, he's done nothing but Star Wars, with the exception of some Avatar: The Last Airbender. And as an actor, it's all Star Wars. As a writer, it's all Star Wars. So he seems like the Star Wars guy.
It's probably not a bad place to be right now, considering how much stuff they're producing.
Yeah.
You've got some fairly high-profile people pop up in this. You mentioned John Leguizamo. He pops up as under very heavily disguised in the first episode, and I saw his name in the credits. I'm like, "Hi, who was he?" He was the guy from Mask On. Peyton Reed of Ant-Man fame directed 2 episodes this season.
They've had quite an impressive collection of guest directors for this series, haven't they?
Robert Rodriguez directs one of the episodes as well, which is actually you can tell it's Rodriguez once you know it's him, because it's about as brutal as it gets, as you can get, for this kind of thing. Yeah. Bryce Dallas Howard directs one, which is interesting, and Carl Weathers, Apollo Creed himself, directs one of the episodes. And
he does too.
Sorry,
Taika Waititi is that.
Taika did one in season 1. I think he's getting his own movie or show now in Star Wars. And I guess the other thing I'm just telling you, if you're an old school Star Wars fan, just watch it. Just watch it. Please just watch it. Each episode is about 30, 40 minutes, usually some are a little longer, which makes them really nice and bite-sized, but don't overstay their welcome, which again is another real strength of it. If you're telling a fairly simplistic story, you don't need 2.5 hours a la Rise of Skywalker to do it. Tell it, get in, tell your story, get the fuck out, which is what they do very nicely here. But we've talked before about Kathleen Kennedy and her sort of, well, I would say it's fairly obvious dedication to identity politics in her films. I mean, it's pretty in your face. Like, she goes around with a T-shirt that says "The Force is female," which, fine, whatever, right? If you're going to do it well. She didn't. But interestingly, there are a number of female characters. In season 1, I talked about Cara Dune, played by the actress whose name escapes me at this moment in time. There we go. And she's got herself into a little bit of trouble on Twitter lately. But I won't go into that. But we also have Fennec Shand, who was a carryover from season 1, played by Ming-Na Wen, probably best known for playing Chun-Li in Street Fighter. Oh yeah, she did. And a couple of female Mandalorian characters. Bo-Katan is one of them, and Koska, played by Sasha Banks, WWE's Sasha Banks. Really? All
right.
And under her actual name, but not her. But there is in the final episode, and unfortunately, I had the final episode spoiled for me. Because it was all over Facebook at what happened in the final episode. So on the off chance you one day sit down and watch it, I'm not going to spoil it for you in case you don't know. But there is a scene where all those female characters need to work together to basically do a distraction to let Mando try and do what he needs to do. So they're fighting off wave after wave of stormtroopers, and they are kicking ass. Mm-hmm. And it happens actually a number of times through the show, where these female characters are sort of doing that team up thing a little bit and working and basically kicking ass and taking names. Mm-hmm. I stop for a minute and go, see, this is how it's done. This is how it's done. If you really want to tell, I 100% agree with having strong female characters in films and TV shows, and especially in the science fiction realm. And we've talked before, representation matters. Yes. You and I, we're white, straight guys. And everybody on our TV screen looked like us growing up. All Indiana Jones, Han Solo, Luke Skywalker. They're all fucking white, straight male. So it's impossible for us to know what it's really like to be a little girl watching Star Wars or reading comic books and not really seeing anyone who looks like you. Yeah. So it's really important for those people to be able to look up. And that's why I've really enjoyed the first Wonder Woman film. I mean, I know she's white, sort of, but again, little girls have a superhero to look up for, and that's important for them. And it's important that in science fiction as well, and that's probably what they're sort of trying to do, I guess, with Ray, and they kind of pulled it off in the first one, but then they just shut the bed after that. With this one, you got 4 kick-ass female Star Wars characters who are just cutting sick, saving Mando's ass time and again, and just ripping through stormtroopers. But at no point in time is the TV show rubbing your face in it going, look, girl power, look at them, girl power, or going, look how fucking smart powerful these women are compared to the stupid men. I mean, I'm not offended by that. I just think it's lazy.
Yeah.
And annoying. And I'm like, and obvious and tactless. Like, I know exactly what you'll be. Or if I look at the, I think we complained about it when it happened, the Endgame, Avengers Endgame, is that scene in the battle at the end where all the female characters come together. She's not alone. And they all do that. They all just happen to come off from wherever they are in the battlefield, just so they can, stand aside, cut them up. And you're just like, oh, come on, guys. Don't be that obvious about it. You don't need to announce it. It's lazy. And
especially in that particular scenario, they've already talked that apparently every single one of them has got an earpiece and they can talk to each other, no problem. They could have very easily had that unification of the female superheroes, just actually still having them already fighting and just going, okay, priority, let's go over there. It would have made it far more empowering for them, sort of like weighing up the balances. It would have given them the character choice. Anyway.
I don't want to go too down that rabbit hole again. I'm not a men's rights activist. I'm seriously not. I'm just telling you, I think it's insulting to women. I think it's tokenism. It's window dressing. It's just like going, here's your fucking enjoy it. Yeah. When we said before, it's not easy, but you can create strong female characters without pandering. And this TV show 100% pulls it off, where it's not wagging its politics in its face. It's not slapping you upside the head going, look how awesome these women are. They're just too busy being awesome. And you're too busy enjoying the show, but to actually enjoying the action and the story to go, I even stop at a minute and go, whoa, isn't it really cool to see all these female characters going out and they've all got mostly individual sort of personalities and stories and motivations, and they're doing their thing and they're kicking ass and they're being awesome. They look awesome. They are awesome. But I don't feel like I'm being pandered to. I don't feel like if women are being pandered to. I don't feel like I'm being, criticized because, like I said, I didn't ask to be born a white man, but I recognize my privilege. But I don't feel, anyway, it didn't feel tacked on and it didn't feel deliberate. It probably was. And that's the real art of it, isn't it? To do something like that and to slot it in so it felt natural.
Yeah.
And so that's why I feel like, this film can do shit like that. And like I said, they're killing stormtroopers and saving people. And, they are almost the breakout stars of a show this season. But at the same time, I don't see people criticizing it the way they did the Star Wars, the sequel trilogy, because it's not being shoved down your throat. In the same way. It felt natural. So I'm sorry I didn't mean to go on about that so much, but it really was obvious to me. And I'm just like, this is how you do it, guys. Marvel guys, go down to the Hall of Mirrors, take a good hard look at yourself, go sit down for half an hour with Favreau and Filoni and watch and just see how you write strong female characters without being obvious and pandering. Said there's a bit of fan service in here, so to cut back away from the politics for a minute. There's a lot. I mean, some people might call it fan service, but it really worked for me. I was like, this is what I wanted from the Star Wars sequels. And if these guys had been in charge of the Star Wars sequels, these would be billion-dollar properties, every single one of them, multi-billion-dollar properties. These films would be, those sequels would have knocked it out of the park. I just hope that they very slowly edge Kathleen Kennedy towards the exit. And after her Leslie Headland series and whatever that fucking one that Patty Jenkins is doing is done, and get these guys into the driver's seat with whatever it is they choose to do next. I don't know about 500 different series, but geez, this one's good.
I'll get around to it, but yeah, I have basically.
You've got a treat waiting for you. You've got a real treat.
I've
Got a
heard
9.8 some of these episodes. Like, I mean, come on. You're already paying for the service.
No, I'm not.
Oh, you can't.
Shay gets it because of his sister. I do not use it because I will not support Disney anymore.
But yeah, fair enough. We'll download it then. I'm sure they won't miss it. One last note. Pedro Pascal, really good in this. Gets a little bit of FaceTime now.
Okay.
And now once you see it, you're like, oh, I can see why they cast him as Max Lord. He was really good in this.
Okay, there you go.
From the sublime to the ridiculous. Tell me about Twin Peaks.
Twin Peaks. Well, for those of you who don't know, Twin Peaks is one of the arguably most iconic TV series of all time because of a multitude of things. It was one of the most mainstream surrealist-inspired TV shows. It was kind of an early, like it's now the thing for established, well-known directors to go, all right, I'm going to make a TV show. And this is going to be my thing that I'm going to create, and it's going to be weird and wonderful and everything you like in all of my movies. This is David Lynch and Carl McLachlan coming together for a whodunit with a supernatural spin to it. The original series has an idiosyncratic FBI agent, that's Carl McLachlan's character, investigates the murder of a young woman in the even more idiosyncratic town of Twin Peaks. And Season 1 and 2 were 1990, 1991. And then 25 years later, we finally got Season 3. And it continues the story. And my God, I loved it. Oh, so good. So good. Season 1 is just sublime. It is... There's slight elements of that kind of X-Files-y kind of feel to it because there is this, because of that surreal element to it and the stranger than fiction lifestyle and the way that they portray all of the characters. Like Carl McLachlan's character has been, his character's name is Dale Cooper. He has been parodied so much now. It's like, damn fine coffee, and talking about pie and things like that. It's all these weird little bits, and they use silence and just very deadpan comedy and things. And it's shot like a telenovela from Spain or something like that.
It really is. And one thing I don't know if you picked it up is that there's constant references in the show to an in-show soap opera that people watch. Yes. And basically, after watching a season, I'm like, okay, Twin Peaks is the soap opera that they're all watching on a TV in the show. It's the show within the show is the show.
Yes, exactly. And there's so many wonderfully detailed like little ins and self-referential jokes and things like that. It is phenomenally written. And season 2 takes it on it embraces more of the supernatural side of things, but you don't lose any of the real character development that you've had through the first ones. Every single character I felt like I at the very least enjoyed, if I didn't love them. And that is my one criticism for season 3, is we get the return of FBI agent Dale Cooper, but not really, because of shit that he experiences. He's not the same Dale Cooper, and that is a shame because I absolutely love the character of Dale Cooper in the first 2 series, and I just wanted more of that character. What I got was a masterclass from Carl McLachlan playing 2 characters and being phenomenal with both of them. Neither of them at all like Dale Cooper, and yet it's still phenomenal, and there's still that very strong kind of feel to it. It loses a little bit of that kind of soap opera within a soap opera kind of attitude. Part of that is because the technology and the way that TV shows and miniseries and this is a miniseries spectacular, as Showtime advertised it. The way that they are filmed is very different. The fact that it looks beautiful. It is stunningly shot. It's just pixel perfect, amazing vistas going from Las Vegas to Twin Peaks and everything in between. It is beautiful to watch. And they embrace a lot more of the stuff that goes on in the movie Fire Walk with Me. And it does weird shit that you just don't see on mainstream TV. And it's so good, so refreshing. It is fucking phenomenal. And the fact that David Lynch, he was the guy who directed the whole of season 3. He was overseeing it. It was his baby to do with. They worked amazingly well with a 25-year gap. How many directors or creative teams are able to pick up where they left off so wonderfully? It's rare. It's very rare. You just look at what we were talking about before, Star Wars. The original trilogy versus the prequel trilogy, it wasn't the same thing, but it was the same production group, the same people in control. And then going from the prequel trilogy to the sequel series, again, it's, they couldn't even do it after 10 or 15 years. And this is 25 years. And they managed to bring back all of these wonderful characters. And some of them were but there were sequences in it that had nothing to do at all with the story. And yet it's just a continuation of these characters' lives. And it was wonderful.
And the great sort of synergy that, like, at the end of the actual season 2, Laura Palmer whispers in someone's ear, "See you in 25 years."
Yes.
And then 25 years later, exactly 25 years later, there was the new season.
Yeah. Either that is just unfathomable planning, or they went, "Oh, we left it on a cliffhanger. Can we do anything with that?" Oh, actually, it turns out we can.
In this case, it might have worked in their advantage, the fact that nothing original gets made anymore, and that nothing without a brand name gets made anymore. And so, I questioned it in a sense. I was like, does Twin Peaks have a lot of brand recognition anymore? Our generation, I don't know, do you remember it being on TV when you were young?
It was something that I never watched when I was young, but I remember it. I remember the adults and the older kids talking about it and going, "Oh, did you see that? It was really weird, wasn't it?" And
I'm saying here, it's like, I don't even know when it was on TV. Yeah. It might have been probably a little. I was 12, 13 when it came out, and so probably a little young for that kind of tally.
Yeah.
But I remember the song because it was the famous "Falling" by Julie Cruz. Was a really big hit. He was here, I assume, in the UK as well. And so it was there was a lot of buzz and a lot of hype around the show when it came out. But I was a little surprised that it still had any kind of cachet outside of hipsters 25 years later. Have I told you my Twin Peaks story about Las Vegas?
No.
A friend of the show, Patria, and I were in Las Vegas walking around. Have you been to Vegas?
No.
It's a very hot place. It's in the middle of the desert, and everything's really far away from everything else. And we're walking around. It was hot. We were tired. We walked into a bar for a drink, and we were talking with the waitress about, while she got our drinks, about the bar we just passed around the corner. There was this bar around the corner called Twin Peaks. They had like a tartan windows and like a mountain theme. And I was like, we're looking at each other going, this is 2013. So I'm like, why would anybody make a bar themed after a freaking David Lynch TV show from 20 bloody years ago? And we're talking to the girl going, what's up with Twin Peaks? Was anybody with a random TV show to theme a bar after? He goes, oh, well, they just call it Twin Peaks because all the girls who work there have big boobs. And I'm like, oh, that makes a little bit more sense.
That was 2013, and then 2017, this series comes out, and there's a lot of it in Vegas.
She had no idea what we were talking about. She was like 19, had never heard of a TV show, and she thought it was bizarre that she had no idea. It was like, it was a TV show back in the 90s directed by David Lynch. And she's like, oh, I don't know who that is. So she was very confused about the whole situation, but it was funny. I really enjoyed season 1 of this when I watched it. Like, I churned through it. I didn't like season 2. I don't think David Lynch liked season 2 from what I recall hearing. I don't think he really wanted to do it at the time. I think it was kind of a one and done kind of thing for him initially. But the ratings of this was so huge. But what was the genius of this for me is it was a Trojan horse of a TV show. Because if you tried to sell this as a David Lynch, I mean, I guess he wasn't a household name exactly, but the kind of thing he normally made, no fucking way he was getting the show made. And if it was, no one was watching it. You know, Log Lady and, you know, what. But what he basically did was he hid the lynchiness inside a fairly traditional murder mystery to start with, at least. Who killed Laura Palmer? And that was the marketing campaign. Who killed Laura Palmer? And, you know, as the longer it got and sort of, you know, the further down that road of season you got out, it sort of came out of its chrysalis. The bizarre David Lynchian monstrosity that it was came out of its chrysalis. And you're like, hang on a second. We're not even talking about Laura Palmer anymore. What the fuck is going on?
Yeah, Laura Palmer just kind of gets slowly
sidelined,
wayline,
vaguely there occasionally. But like you were like, okay, I've got no idea what's going on anymore, but I like it.
Yeah,
and that was when it sort of started to come around to me. I'm like, this show is the soap opera, and I think that's fucking brilliant. And it's the fact that he kind of snuck this one in to the mainstream zeitgeist through that Trojan horse approach is absolutely outstanding. And if you haven't watched it, it's on one of the streaming services, right?
It's on Stan, all of it.
I would recommend the first season. If you really, really enjoy that, you'll probably enjoy the second season. Are you going to hang in there and maybe watch Firewalk with me now?
I will do, but I'm taking a bit of a breather because there's only so much surrealism that I can take in a 2-week period. And from everything that I've seen of Firewalk with Me, it goes really surreal.
It's a brain tweezer. It's a brain twister on it.
And the last 2 or 3 episodes of season 3 of Twin Peaks go really weird. Like, there's one episode where there's hardly any speech, and it's just lots of sort of like industrial noise and black and flashing and potentially going through the cosmos and all sorts of weird stuff. Like, okay, and now we've got what's this? It's basically a talking teapot. That's what. Like I say, the 2 big gripes that I have for season 3 are, I would love to see more of the original Dale Cooper because he was so kind of so good and honest and nice and amenable, and he was just a joy to watch, and he was really smart. He was able to kind of pick things up. I just wanted that. That's just a personal thing, but I understand the narrative point of it, and they did it really well. The other thing is they left it on a cliffhanger, and it's like, it's so frustrating. Maybe I don't want to wait another 25 years.
He'd probably be dead by then, but maybe he can still write the script and hand it off to someone. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I would nominate my brother to do it. He does surreal fairly well.
That would be quite a coup. I'm not. You're normally a big fan of Lynch's stuff?
I always find myself liking it more than I feel I would. So, like, I still actually like his version of Dune, in spite of so many things wrong with it. I still kind of appreciate what he does. Elephant Man is amazing. Eraserhead is amazing. Blue Velvet is fucking amazing beyond belief. I even like Mulholland Drive. I always find some really interesting things at work in his stuff, and it's like, yeah, this is cool. And to go through 3 seasons of Twin Peaks was just heaven.
I'm a lot more. Some of it I absolutely adore, but the other things, like I remember Lost Highway, I walked out of that. I had no idea what was going on.
I haven't watched that, so
it may not be the best thing he's ever done, but it's an acquired taste. but I like the fact that he pushes the boundaries.
Yeah. Holy shit! I didn't realize that David Lynch directed the PlayStation 2 adverts for the third place, but it totally makes sense. I remember that advert. It was really weird and fucked up, and I think there was a duck. It was, oh, and no, there was a weird kind of like computerized deformed woman with huge eyes, and she's like, "Welcome to the third place," even though it was advertising PlayStation 2. And they never elaborated where their first and second places were. It makes sense that it's David Lynch.
He is, he's different.
Mm.
If you haven't ever seen Inland Empire, my goodness, that might be the most terrifying thing I've ever seen, even though I've got no idea what it's about.
Well, it's very clear. It says here, as an actress begins to adopt the persona of their character in a film, her world becomes nightmarish and surreal. There you go.
And there are talking rabbits and stuff in it. It's bizarre.
But the other thing that I do really appreciate for Inland Empire is how much of a showcase it is for Kyle MacLachlan as an actor, because he is fucking brilliant.
And he works very well with David Lynch.
Yes, he does. But particularly in season 3, where he has got those two character personas, he is legitimately scary in one of those. He's just quite reserved, and he's made up to kind of be weather worn, and he just looks like the kind of guy that has seen shit, done shit that will make you cry just because you're thinking about it. He doesn't need to tell you any of it. He's just going to make you cry, and it's awesome.
I just think that he is David Lynch is partially responsible for his casting in Showgirls, so we should all be grateful for that, because what a role that was. Shall we? Have you got anything more, or shall we move on to our last topic?
That was it. Let's go to the last topic.
I'd say, cool. I'm 100% behind George in this, but if you haven't seen Twin Peaks, you're missing out. It's awesome TV. You have never seen anything like it, and that's a good thing.
If you don't like the first 2 episodes of season 1, don't stick around, because it just gets more from there.
Yeah, if you like Friends, don't watch it.
Yeah, if you want something weird, watch it.
Yeah. Totally Under Control is a film I watched last week. And it is a documentary by, I think, a very prolific documentary maker, Alex Gibney. I've talked about some of his stuff on the show before. He won an Oscar for Enron, the smartest guys in the room. He directed the Going Clear, Scientology, and the Prison of Belief documentary, Taxi to the Dark Side, The Armstrong Lie, Out for Blood, the Theranos documentary, which is great as well, by the way. If you like a documentary, he directed one of the episodes of The Looming Tower. 0 Days. He's really a very busy man. But last year, he released at least 2 films and a TV show. Coming soon called Agents of Chaos. But he directed this documentary called Totally Under Control. And it is an in-depth look at how the United States government handled the response to the COVID-19 outbreak during the early months of the pandemic, which is interesting. We kind of started here, like we're talking about when times get precedented, and you're like, it was a year ago. So we've come that far down the line. We're starting to get documentaries about the start of the pandemic. So that's how far from the start of the pandemic we are. And Alex Gibney is actually, they shot all this while lockdown was on in the States last year, whatever form lockdown took over there. And they actually had to invent some fairly innovative and interesting new ways to film their participants, which they actually highlight from a technical perspective. But they talk to any number of different politicians and health experts to really sort of get under the covers and go, what was the United States doing at the time the pandemic started? And we sort of noted again at the start of the show, they haven't done very well. Over 400,000 Americans have died of this now. They're not the worst in the world, but they're a long way short of the best. And it's unsurprisingly an absolutely brutal skewering of how the United States government responded to this. and mainly how Donald Trump responded to this. I don't know that he's done anything criminal in this particular instance. There are many other instances to pick from. But I don't think any fair-minded person, and I'm by no means that because I can't stand the man, but I don't think a fair person can look at the evidence that Alex Gibney racks up in this documentary, could come away with any other impression other than he's guilty of a murder of hundreds of thousands of his own countrymen. That's basically it. Essentially, the thesis of the film is that Donald Trump saw the economy, the United States economy, and its strength as his main battering ram for re-election, if that makes sense. Like, we're going to go into this election that happened last November and going to go, hey, our economy, the economy apparently was doing quite well over there. That was going to be what got him re-elected. He was going to lean on that because I guess he was smart enough or had enough nous to realize that he's a repugnant individual who most people don't like personally. But as long as the economy is strong, they'll put up with him, right?
Yeah.
And so seeing that as his main focus on getting re-elected, he did the sums, or at least he was smart enough to listen to the people who were doing the sums for him, that any kind of the required response to control COVID-19 that we saw here in Australia involved a fairly severe lockdown. We had it for what?
6 months?
6 months, 2 weeks? 6 months, 6 months, 6 weeks, 2 months back in like March, April through to early May. And it kicked our economy in the ass. Our Australian economy went back into recession. You can test them at firsthand what that effect it had on your life. And so Trump has sort of done the sums here and said, he's listened to the advice. What we need to do to control COVID-19 is to basically institute a kind of lockdown, nationwide lockdown. He didn't necessarily have that power to do it himself, but he could have encouraged it and assisted the states in doing it by, providing stimulus packages, a little bit like we did in Australia with JobKeeper. He could have tried to do something similar to that, but he figured he sort of made a risk reward sort of equation and gone, if I do this, that's going to kill the economy. It's going to kick the economy in the ass. And then it's going to completely cut off at the knees his main focus, his main message for re-election, that the strong economy. There's no strong economy. He's basically gone, I think there's a good chance they're going to lose this election. So the thesis of the film is he chose to downplay, minimize, and ignore the seriousness of this pandemic in the hopes of keeping the economy strong enough to get him re-elected. So if you ignore, and I come with a pre-existing bias, I hate him, but I don't know how you can deny the amount of evidence that Gibney has racked up from these people. The stunning incompetence and callous, ignorance of the people at the top. And this leads on. It's a sort of these, and it is not just and these have lingering effects. So Trump's cult, and I do use that word advisedly, it is a cult of people who politicize wearing a mask. Obviously we've got our rare idiots here in Australia, my freedom, but they are rare. And I think they are encouraged by someone like Trump as well. So all he really had to do at the start, he could have saved hundreds of thousands of lives. But coming out on day one of it and going, look, it's pretty serious. I think at the very least, we should be wearing masks. And every time he was seen in public after that, a little bit like what Biden did, he was wearing a mask. He could have sold the fucking Make America Great Again masks like he did eventually, made a shit ton of money, which is what he's mainly interested in. He saved lives, made money, and who knows, maybe if he'd handled it a little bit more responsibly, he might have still been re-elected. He didn't lose by that much. So it's mainly talking heads, people with authority. It's kind of depressing. Probably more depressing if you're an American. It kind of made me feel good because I'm like, thank God I'm not in the United States. I do worry about my friends over there, but can't really do much about that, especially with Trump supporters. It is a little bit, I'm sure if you're an actual American, you're probably going to find it a little bit depressing that your leaders failed you so badly. And in this case, I don't think it was your state leaders. I think it was the federal government, and mainly And in fairness, that's how it is. The president does kind of set the tone for the country. And as I said, he didn't have to do a whole lot. He just could have come out, wore a mask, said this is real, said this is serious, not downplayed it, not made gags about how maybe it's fake, which he kind of played footsie with for a little while, but maybe it's just the flu. You know, if he'd done the bare minimum, just taken this seriously, worn a mask and people listen to the health experts on this one, he could have saved so many lives. But when you stop and consider who this man is, obviously that was never going to happen. He met an enemy he couldn't browbeat into submission, and the whole country.
People.
Sorry, exactly his own countrymen, the people who he was paid to protect and help and serve, have failed as a result. And now imagine, considering it affects mainly older people and people who are a great deal of those people who died are probably people who voted for him. And he's completely shameless about the whole thing. So, look, I mean, I enjoy giving these documentaries. They're well-crafted, well put together. They're nice to look at. They're well-paced. If you're like me, this is probably not going to tell you anything you didn't already suspect, but at the very least, I guess you can walk away from this film with a deeper sense of confidence, understanding that what has happened in that country is and remains a crime. Maybe not the kind of crime you can charge somebody with, but it's criminal what happened there. And it's a cautionary tale. Don't elect fuckwits.
Well, I kind of hope that would be the case, but
Boris Johnson still in power.
He's a muppet. He's a legitimate, strategically shaved muppet.
And I mean, I think this is not a documentary. This is purely a me thing. Is that the only reason we have got away from this so far so good is because Scott Morrison, our fuckwit Prime Minister, doesn't have direct control over a response to this. Our state premiers do. And somehow they all turn out to be reasonably competent at this kind of thing. So if we left it to our federal government, wretchedly incompetent federal government, I'm sure we would be looking a little bit more like what the UK looks like right now.
Oh, God.
And that's not good.
Not only is it the COVID stuff, but of course, they're now feeling the effects of Brexit. And some people are kind of going, what? I'm having to do more paperwork and it's costing me more to send things and receive things from Europe? Doy.
Well, I mean, I recall when I was in Europe last that I was a little bit annoyed that as an Australian, who I guess was part of Commonwealth, going into the UK, there's the EU line, and then there's the fuck off and everyone else line. And we had to stand in the fuck off and everyone else line. I'm like, I kind of felt like, we fought, our Australian troops died for your fucking country in 2 World Wars. You're not in the EU, you can fuck off over there, right? Like, and now I guess the Brits, when they go to their holiday house in Spain, they're going to be standing in the other line instead of the nice, fast EU line. So, yeah, welcome to our world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's going to be weird as and when I go back.
Like, you got still got a British passport?
Yeah.
Because you're only a permanent citizen, right? You're a permanent resident.
Citizenship in Australia, this country
is expensive, right?
Huh?
It's expensive, right?
Yeah, it's like $8,000 or something.
And then you have to vote. You don't want to vote.
I don't want to vote. I don't vote in the UK. I'm not going to vote here.
Yeah, if you're a permanent resident, you can get away with that shit. But so, but yeah, you at least you'll imagine there'll be a special line for UK passport holders.
I would certainly hope so, unless I go, no, we fucked it up so bad, we actually even deleted that line.
I mean, it's a minor complaint. It was just like, the EU line was like, in like that. The plebeian, everyone, not in the EU line, took about 10 minutes. I'm like, well,
that's it. I remember traveling to and from Europe for holidays and stuff like that, and it was so nice just kind of just basically wave my passport. People say like, yes, this is worth more than gold, and just walk through. It was great. But now it's, what?
And I think it's why most Australians who've been to Europe and in the UK, that's probably the main reason is the passport line and the fast passport line. That's probably the main reason most Australians were like, why would you want to leave Europe? You've got the fast passport line. None of the trade benefits. They go, but passport lines. That's the thing. And like that's why most Australians are like, what? They want to leave? Why? They get in really fast when they go to Paris. But
That's the funny thing is, all the people who are complaining are all people who have voted to leave. It's like, well, what did you think you were voting on then?
I never saw the story in The Guardian recently about people in Kent, I think. And they built a giant truck parking lot there basically for all the lorries that go back and forth to Europe with all the stuff. And because of an extra time they're going to take to get over past the border now, they kind of had to have a staging area for them. And these truck drivers, they set up this area, but they didn't set up any, shall we say, porta potties. So these truck drivers are kind of like peeing in the bottles and chucking it out the window. And so apparently the whole area kind of has a pretty distinctive smell now. And all these people in Kent were like, oh, I like going out and fiddling around in my garden, but the whole area smells like urine now. And they're like, so did you vote for Brexit? Yes, of course I voted for Brexit. And you're like, well, maybe you should have stopped. I guess maybe you couldn't foresee people throwing bottles of piss out inside your house, but can't what you wish for.
Yep.
But did you learn nothing from Wonder Woman 84?
At least they'll be able to, like that area, once the lorries and things have cleared, it'll be ripe for planting lemon trees.
Here we go. It's a
lemonade out of lemons.
There we go. On such a cheerful and uplifting note, like people urinating in trucks, probably time to call it a night.
I think so. Thank you, everyone, for listening along. We didn't have anyone offering to give us money this time, but you know what? I probably wouldn't necessarily do that either.
That's the first and only time that's happened in the last 7 years. So,
yeah, that's fair. But we obviously talked about Carlito's Way. Next week, we are going to be going on to Eastern Promises, care of Viggo Mortensen. Travis talked about The Mandalorian Season 2. I talked about Twin Peaks Seasons 1, 2, and 3. We just finished wrapping up on Totally Under Control, new documentary, and random Brexit P. So,
pretty much. If you want to follow along with what we're going to talk about next week, I'm going to be talking about Death to 2020, the new Charlie Brooker product on Netflix. And if you've got the Foxtel, the new Alex Gibney series, Age of Chaos. So, like I said, he had a busy 2020. If you haven't had your feel of me rabbiting on about documentaries, we'll talk a little about Age of Chaos. Legally available on Foxtel.
I am going to session the Nicolas Cage series on Netflix, all about swearing. So we'll have some interesting stuff
next week. And it says if you want to watch it, and I enjoy that when I listen to podcasts. I'll actually download the podcast when they're talking about the show or a film I've actually seen, so I can actually follow along and go, oh yeah, I like that bit too. So feel free to do that. Next week, drop your comments, hit up the Facebook page, give George money. All the good things.
Give us money just to cover the costs. But yeah, please like us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch. Follow us. It helps with more exposure for everyone. Even if you do just listen to the podcast, go over there. Just give us a like, give us a follow, and then you can go back to just doing it on your standard podcast services. We would really, really appreciate that. On that note, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and we will see you next time.
Good night.